He shielded the extraterrestrial young with his body. Now the Queen won't free him. Captain Leo Hawk's heart raced as he looked over the war-torn landscape. The Zirax had been a thorn in humanity's side for years. The war seemed endless, but today was different. Today, Leo and his squad were on a special mission, one that might turn the tide in this ongoing conflict. They were about to rescue a group of alien refugees, young, terrified children caught in the crossfire of a brutal war. Leo gripped the handle of his rifle, his fingers sweaty despite the cold. The planet they were on was hostile, and the Zirax weren't known for showing mercy. His squad of 5 elite soldiers moved cautiously through the dense, twisted trees, their footsteps light on the dirt path. The trees were thick here, their branches gnarled and heavy, creating shadows that seemed to swallow everything in sight. "Stay sharp," Leo ordered in a low voice, his breath steady despite the tension. "We don't know what we'll find. Keep your eyes peeled." The young soldiers nodded, their expressions tense but focused. They had trained for this kind of operation, but that didn't mean they weren't nervous. They were deep in enemy territory, on a hostile alien world, with a mission to save children who were caught between 2 warring species. As they approached the alien outpost, the smell of smoke and charred metal hung thick in the air. The settlement was small, just a cluster of makeshift shelters that had been erected by the Zirax to protect the refugees. But it was under siege. They could hear the distant sounds of gunfire and the heavy thud of alien war machines moving through the trees. "Time's running out," Leo muttered. "Let's move." They quickened their pace, weaving between the trees until they reached the clearing where the refugee camp was hidden. The sight that greeted them was worse than Leo could have imagined. Bodies lay scattered on the ground, both human and Zirax, caught in the crossfire. Smoke billowed from the remains of a destroyed transport ship, and the alien soldiers were already beginning to retreat. Leo's heart tightened in his chest. The children were still there, and they were terrified. Some hid under the wreckage of the ship, others huddled together in the shadows of the crumbling buildings. Leo's eyes scanned the area, his heart heavy with the knowledge that they were running out of time. "Get them out of here," Leo ordered. "We'll cover you." The soldiers moved quickly, grabbing the frightened children and ushering them towards the extraction point. But just as they began to move, an explosion rang out, sending them diving for cover. Leo barely had time to react before a Zirax soldier appeared from behind a wrecked vehicle, his plasma rifle aimed directly at Leo. Without thinking, Leo lunged forward, knocking the soldier to the ground. The blast from the rifle hit the dirt beside him, and the explosion sent a shockwave through the air. Leo's body took the brunt of the force as he shielded the child nearest to him. He could feel the heat of the blast against his skin, the deafening sound of metal and fire ringing in his ears. For a moment, everything seemed to blur. The world spun around him and his body went limp. He couldn't breathe, his vision blurred. He could hear the children screaming, the cries of his squad as they tried to fight off the Zirax soldiers. Then nothing. When Leo came to, everything was silent. His head throbbed and his body ached, but he forced his eyes open. He was no longer in the clearing. Instead, he found himself lying on a cold metal floor, his hands bound to the side of a metallic table. He groaned, lifting his head to look around, but his surroundings were unfamiliar. The walls were smooth, glowing with soft blue light. A figure stood before him, tall, regal, and unmistakably alien. She was the Zirax queen, Kaiserath. Her green skin glimmered under the light, her eyes burning with an intense, calculating gaze. She stood motionless, watching him, her sharp features making her appear both beautiful and deadly. "Captain Leo Hawk," she said, her voice cold and precise. "You are awake." Leo struggled to sit up, the pain in his chest and limbs sharp and unforgiving. "What is this?" he croaked, his voice hoarse. "This is my ship," Kaiserath replied, her expression unreadable, "and you are in my care." Leo's mind raced. He had been shielded by his own body, protecting one of the Zirax children from the blast, but why was he still alive? And why had the Queen taken him prisoner? "I didn't ask for your help," Leo said through gritted teeth. Kaiserath tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a faint smile. "You didn't need to. You are alive because I decided to spare you. You will stay with us now, and you will teach us the ways of your people, the human tactics, the strategy, the mind of your species." Leo's eyes narrowed. "I won't help you conquer Earth." "Oh, it's not conquest I'm after," Kaiserath replied, her voice smooth like silk. "It's something far more interesting. You see, I have an offer for you, Captain. You will stay with us, protect the young ones you saved, and in return, I will spare your life. And if you behave, I might even let you go." Leo clenched his fists. This wasn't what he had signed up for. He had always known war, but this was something else entirely. He wasn't going to be a pawn in her game. He would find a way out, but for now, he had no choice. "Fine," he muttered, "but this isn't over." Kaiserath's smile widened, but it was a cold, calculating smile. "We'll see about that, Captain Hawk." As the door to the room closed behind her, Leo was left alone in the quiet, his mind already working, plotting. The real battle was just beginning. Leo lay on the cold metal table, his hands still bound, but the pain in his body had lessened. He could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. The Zeerak's queen, Kaiserath, had spared his life, but the cost was unclear. She had made it clear that she wasn't doing this out of kindness, but out of a calculated decision to use him for something greater, something dangerous. He sat up slowly, testing his strength. His wounds had been treated, but his muscles still felt sore and stiff, like his body was reminding him of the battle he had just survived. He winced as he rubbed his head, still dizzy from the explosion. The ship's interior was eerily silent, the hum of machinery the only sound that filled the room. Leo's mind raced. The Zeeraks had always been ruthless in their pursuit of power, but this felt different. There was something unsettling about the Queen's presence, her calm demeanor in the face of such violence. The door to the room slid open again, and a pair of Zeerak's soldiers entered, their dark eyes scanning the room before locking on Leo. One of them stepped forward and spoke in their alien language, which Leo didn't fully understand. He had picked up bits and pieces of Zeerak's speech during his time as a soldier, but it was clear the soldiers didn't expect him to answer. The soldier gestured for Leo to follow, and though Leo wanted to resist, he knew there was little choice. These creatures were far stronger than humans, and there were too many of them. If they wanted to keep him alive, they would. If they didn't, they could end his life in seconds. Leo stood and followed them through a long, narrow hallway. The walls of the ship were sleek and metallic, glowing faintly with a pale blue light. The air was thick with the scent of machinery and something else, something almost organic. It was an unsettling feeling, as though the ship itself had a life of its own. As they passed through more corridors, Leo saw glimpses of other rooms, some filled with more Zeerak soldiers, others with alien technology he couldn't identify. The ship felt vast, like a city in the sky, each part of it serving a purpose he couldn't yet understand. Eventually, they arrived at a large chamber. It was a place of power, he could tell. The walls were lined with screens and holographic displays, and at the far end, seated on a raised platform, was the queen herself, Kaiserath. Her piercing gaze locked onto him as he entered the room, her expression unreadable. "Captain Hawk," she said, her voice smooth and cool. "You are awake. I trust you have recovered from your injury." Leo didn't speak immediately. He stood tall despite the lingering pain in his body. He had always believed in fighting back, in doing whatever it took to protect his people. But now, with his hands bound and his freedom stripped away, he had to think carefully. "I'm fine," he said at last, his voice steady. "But I still don't understand why I'm here. Why am I alive? What do you want from me?" Kaiserath's lips curled into a faint smile. "You are alive because I choose it, Captain. You protected one of my young from certain death, and for that I will allow you to live. But don't mistake my actions for mercy." Her eyes glinted with a cold fire. "You are here because I have plans for you." Leo didn't respond immediately. He was trying to piece together what she meant, but it didn't make sense. What could a queen like her possibly want from a human soldier? There had to be something more. "I need you to teach me," she continued, her voice calm but firm. "Your people have been a thorn in my side for far too long. The war has gone on for years, and now I seek a way to end it, but not in the way you think." Leo felt a pang of unease. She had already shown herself to be a master of manipulation. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone wary. Kaiserath's eyes never left his. "I need your knowledge, the tactics your species uses to fight, the strategies you employ. You see, my people have their ways of war, but they are limited. I want to learn more about the way humans think, how you fight, how you plan. I want you to teach me. In return, I will keep you alive. I will keep you safe." Leo's jaw clenched. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Queen wanted to use him as a tool, his knowledge, his experience. She wanted him to teach her how to defeat his own people. The thought disgusted him. "I will never help you conquer Earth." Leo said firmly, his voice sharp. Kaiserath's smile faded, but she didn't seem angry. Instead, there was a calculating look in her eyes, as if she was considering his response. "It is not conquest that I desire, Captain. It is a victory for my people. You see, Earth is not the only target. There are others, many others, but the war with your species must end first, and you will be the key to ending it." Leo remained silent, his mind racing. He had always known that war was full of difficult choices, but this was something entirely different. He had been trained to fight, to protect humanity, not to betray it. Yet here he was, caught in the middle of something much bigger than himself, much bigger than anything he had ever imagined. "You will stay here," Kaiserath said, breaking the silence. "And you will learn about my people. You will see how we live, how we think. And in return, I will spare your life. But if you refuse to help me, there will be consequences. The young ones you saved, they will not be safe. Do you understand?" Leo's heart sank as he realized what she was implying. She would use the children as leverage, holding them hostage to force him to comply. But even with that threat hanging over him, Leo knew that he couldn't give in. He couldn't betray everything he had fought for. "I won't betray my people," Leo said, his voice resolute. "No matter what you do." Kaiserath's eyes narrowed, her expression hardening. "We shall see, Captain Hawk, we shall see." Leo's life aboard the Xerax ship had become a strange mixture of uncertainty and routine. Every day was the same. He would be summoned to the Queen's chamber, where he was forced to participate in discussions about human tactics, war strategies, and anything that might help Kaiserath understand how humanity fought. She was insistent on learning from him, and Leo had no choice but to comply. Though he had tried to resist at first, speaking in riddles or offering half-truths, Leo soon realized that Kaiserath was far too clever to be misled. Every lie he told, every attempt to misdirect her was met with sharp scrutiny. She wasn't interested in wasting time on games. If he was going to be of any use to her, she expected full cooperation. It wasn't just the Queen who kept a close watch on him. The Xerax soldiers were always present, making sure he didn't try anything foolish. They were large, with hard, green scales and dark eyes that seemed to pierce through him. They were silent, ever watchful, and made no attempt to hide their hostility. Despite the pressure, Leo had begun to learn more about the Xerax culture, their history, and their way of thinking. It was clear that they were not the mindless monsters he had once imagined them to be. Their society had been built on survival, shaped by centuries of warfare and scarcity. But they were not all the same. Some, like the Queen, had a ruthless, calculating nature. Others, like the young ones Leo had saved, had the innocence of any child, caught up in the chaos of a war they never asked for. Chiron, the young Xerax he had shielded, had grown especially attached to him. She followed him around the ship whenever she was allowed, watching him curiously, her big, amber eyes filled with a mix of fear and fascination. She didn't fully understand why he was here or why the Queen wanted him, but she felt a strange sense of trust in him. It was both a gift and a burden. Leo didn't know what to make of it. He had never been a father, but the protective instincts he had developed on the battlefield seemed to kick in when he was around her. He had promised to keep her safe, and despite the circumstances, he intended to honor that promise. The days blurred into each other, and as time passed, Leo began to realize that he was no longer just a prisoner. He was something more, something the Queen needed. She had stopped asking him about human war tactics and had started demanding more. She wanted to know about the structure of Earth's governments, the psychology of soldiers, and the strategies behind human alliances. "I need to understand why your species fights so fiercely," Kaiserath told him one day as they sat in her chamber, surrounded by glowing screens. "You are not the strongest species. Your weapons are primitive compared to ours, yet you persist. Why?" Leo looked at her, his gaze hard. "It's because we fight for what we believe in. We fight for the people we love, for our homes, for our freedom. You may have better weapons, but you don't have the same will to fight." Kaiserath studied him closely, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Willpower is a dangerous thing, Captain Hawk. It makes humans unpredictable." "I'd rather be unpredictable than be controlled," Leo shot back. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned her attention to a display screen where a holographic map of Earth appeared. The map showed military bases, cities, and strategic locations across the planet. "I will invade Earth whether you help me or not," she said quietly. "But if you do help me, I can promise you that your people will not suffer as much. You will be spared." Leo's heart raced. He could see the Queen's plan forming. She wanted to cripple Earth's defense, take control of its resources, and make humanity her subjects. But what she didn't know was that Earth had a powerful defense of its own. The human spirit, once ignited, could not be extinguished so easily. "I won't betray my people," Leo said firmly. "You won't win, not as long as there are humans who fight." Kaiserath's lips curled into a slight smile. "We shall see, Captain." That night, as Leo lay on his bed in his small, prison-like quarters, he thought about his options. He couldn't stay here forever, not while the Queen's plans continued. There had to be a way to escape, to warn Earth, to stop her before she reached the planet. He had to act quickly before it was too late. The next day, Leo's routine continued. He was summoned again to the Queen's chamber where he was expected to continue teaching her. But as he entered, he noticed something different. The atmosphere was charged with tension, and the Queen was not alone. A group of high-ranking Xerax soldiers stood by her side, their faces grim. The Queen's gaze was icy as she looked at Leo. "Captain Hawk," she said slowly, "you have become troublesome. You continue to resist, even as you provide me with the tools I need to defeat your people." Leo's heart skipped a beat. He could feel the shift in the air like a storm was approaching. "You are not cooperating," Kaiserath continued, "and your little alliance with the Xerax rebels has not gone unnoticed." Leo's breath caught in his throat. He had tried to keep his contacts with the Xerax defectors secret, but it seemed that the Queen had learned of his efforts to reach out to them. The defectors had provided him with vital information, how to sabotage the Queen's plans, how to disrupt her supply lines. But now that knowledge had been discovered. "I have given you the chance to save your people, Captain," Kaiserath said coldly, "but you refuse. And now there will be consequences." Leo's mind raced. He had anticipated this moment. The Queen would retaliate, using anything she could to break him. He had to be careful. The Queen gestured to the soldiers behind her. "Take him to the detention chamber. We shall see if he will change his mind after a more persuasive method is used." As the soldiers grabbed him, Leo fought back, struggling against their powerful grips. But it was no use. They were too strong. They dragged him down the long corridors of the ship, past the cold, silent walls, to a dark, isolated chamber. The door slammed shut behind him, and Leo was left alone, his body bruised and his mind racing. The Queen was playing a dangerous game, and it was clear she had no intention of letting him go easily. But Leo was not a man who gave up easily. He had fought for everything he believed in, and he wasn't about to stop now. He would find a way out. He would warn Earth, stop the Queen's plans, and save the Xerax children he had promised to protect. The battle for his freedom and for humanity's survival was far from over. Leo's mind raced as the heavy door to his detention chamber slammed shut. The Xerax soldiers had left him alone, but their threat still hung in the air. He had been taken by force, and the Queen's intentions were becoming clearer with every passing moment. She wasn't just using him for knowledge. She was using him as a pawn in a much larger game. Leo wasn't afraid of death, but the thought of Earth falling under the Queen's rule terrified him. His people had fought too hard for their freedom to let it all be taken away by an alien Queen's ambition. He had to find a way out, but he knew he couldn't do it alone. It was then that Leo remembered the Xerax defectors, the small group of rebels within the Queen's ranks who had been secretly helping him. He had made contact with them in the hope of finding a way to stop her plans, but now he realized how crucial their support would be. If they were still out there, they could help him escape. They could help him stop Kaiserath, but the defectors were scattered across the ship, hidden in places the Queen would never suspect. Leo knew it wouldn't be easy to find them and even harder to trust them. But he had no choice. Leo waited for what felt like hours, the silence of the room pressing down on him like a weight. He had to be patient. The Queen would think he was broken, that he would eventually give in to her demands. She couldn't be more wrong. Leo's mind was still sharp, still filled with the drive to fight. As the hours passed, Leo began to hear soft footsteps outside his cell. The door opened slowly, and a figure stepped inside, cloaked in the shadows. Leo's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. It was one of the defectors. "Captain Hawk," the figure whispered, their voice low and urgent. "It's time." Leo's heart leaped. He recognized the voice. It was Talera, a Xerax officer who had been working against the Queen from the inside. She had provided him with information about the ship's systems, and together they had planned the next steps. "What's the plan?" Leo whispered back, careful not to raise his voice. The last thing he needed was to alert the Queen's soldiers. "We have a way to get you out of here," Talara said, her voice steady but filled with an underlying sense of urgency. "The Queen has a weakness. There's a location on this ship deep in the lower levels where she keeps the Xerax war machines. If we can get there, we can disable her forces, send a message to Earth, and start a rebellion." Leo's mind raced. This was it, the opportunity he had been waiting for. "Tell me what I need to do," Leo said, his voice firm. He wasn't going to waste this chance. Talara glanced around to make sure they were not being watched. "We'll have to move quickly. I'll get you to the transport bay, but after that, you'll be on your own. The lower levels are heavily guarded, and the Queen's most loyal soldiers will be on high alert." "We don't have much time," Leo nodded. "Let's do it." With that, Talara unlocked the chains that held Leo in place. His body was stiff from the confinement, but the pain was nothing compared to the surge of adrenaline that rushed through him. Freedom was within his reach. The two of them moved quickly, staying in the shadows as they navigated the dark corridors of the ship. The Xerax vessel was vast, much larger than anything Leo had imagined. The halls were lined with strange alien technology, and the walls hummed with the sound of engines deep within the ship. Talara led Leo to a side passage, a narrow hallway hidden behind a metal door that clicked open with a quiet hiss. They moved swiftly, avoiding patrols and staying as silent as possible. The ship seemed deserted at times, but Leo knew better than to let his guard down. The Queen's soldiers were everywhere. After what felt like hours of moving in silence, they arrived at the transport bay. Talara stopped in front of a small, hidden hatch and turned to Leo. "This is where I leave you," she said quietly. "I'll draw their attention away while you make your way to the lower levels. Don't stop for anything. If you need to, use the transport pods to get there quickly." Leo's eyes met hers, filled with gratitude. "Thank you. You've done more than I could ever repay." Talara gave him a small nod. "We're in this together, Captain. I only hope that you can stop the Queen before it's too late." With that, she stepped back into the shadows and disappeared. Leo took a deep breath and approached the transport pod. He knew the risk. Once he was on his own, there would be no turning back. But he also knew that this was his only chance to save Earth and the Xerax children he had promised to protect. He climbed into the pod and activated the controls. The ship's engines roared to life, and the pod shot down the narrow corridor. Leo's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the corridors pass by at a dizzying speed. He had no idea where he was going, but he knew that the Queen was growing closer to her goal. If he didn't act soon, it would be too late. The transport pod came to a sudden stop, and Leo stepped out, finding himself in a dark, abandoned part of the ship. The lower levels. He could feel the cold in the air, the faint hum of machinery, and the oppressive silence. This was where the Queen kept her war machines, and where Leo would have to make his stand. He moved carefully, using the shadows to stay hidden from any patrolling guards. The hallway was filled with strange alien markings, and the air was thick with the scent of oil and machinery. Leo could feel the weight of the situation on his shoulders. He had one chance to stop the Queen, and it had to be now. As he approached the main control room, he heard voices, low, murmuring in an alien language. Leo's instincts kicked in. He pressed his back against the wall, his hand on the weapon he had stolen from one of the soldiers earlier. He waited, holding his breath, listening for any sign of movement. Two Xerax soldiers appeared, walking toward him. They didn't see him, and Leo didn't hesitate. He stepped out of the shadows and took them down quickly, silently. They collapsed to the floor with barely a sound. Leo's heart raced as he continued deeper into the control room. He had no idea what he was about to face, but he knew that this was his only chance to prevent the Queen's invasion. As he approached the central control panel, he began to work quickly. The holographic screens flickered to life as he accessed the ship's systems, searching for the control code that would disable the Queen's forces. He had no idea what he was doing, but the information Talara had provided him was enough to get started. Then, the alarms sounded. The Queen had found him. Leo's heart raced. He had no more time to waste. The alarms blared throughout the ship, the red lights flashing as the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridors. Leo's heart raced, but he didn't panic. The Queen's soldiers were coming. He had only moments to finish what he had started. His fingers flew over the control panel, scanning for the code that would disable the Xerax war machines. Sweat dripped down his brow as the seconds ticked by, the urgency of the situation closing in on him. The control room was eerily quiet aside from the alarms and the faint hum of alien technology. Leo's mind raced, trying to recall the information Talera had given him. The Queen's war machines were the heart of her power. If he could disable them, he could cripple her entire fleet, buying Earth the time it needed to prepare for the invasion. His fingers landed on the code. A series of numbers and symbols, an encryption that only the highest-ranking Xerax officers would have access to. Talera had risked everything to get this to him. He didn't have time to hesitate. He input the code. The screen flickered, and for a moment Leo thought he had failed. But then the system responded and the war machines powered down. A wave of relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. The sound of pounding footsteps grew louder. The Queen's soldiers were closing in. Leo had to act fast. He grabbed a small device from the control panel and ran. The escape route had been planned, but now it felt like a race against time. He darted through the hallways, keeping to the shadows as best he could. The ship was large and the soldiers were everywhere. If they caught him, it would be over. His breath came in ragged gasps as he sprinted down another hallway, taking sharp turns and ducking into side corridors to avoid detection. The transport pod that had brought him to the lower levels was still nearby, but he had no idea how long he had before the entire ship was locked down. He had to reach it before they sealed off the escape routes. The sound of more footsteps echoed behind him, growing louder. Leo's heart pounded in his chest. He turned a corner and skidded to a stop, finding himself in a dead end. The only option now was to fight or die. He spun around just in time to see two Xerax soldiers rounding the corner. Without thinking, Leo drew his weapon. The first soldier lunged at him with a snarl, but Leo was quicker. He ducked and slammed his elbow into the soldier's side, knocking him to the ground. The second soldier aimed a plasma rifle at him, but Leo was already on the move, tackling him to the floor. The weapon went flying, and in the struggle, Leo managed to knock the soldier out with a well-placed blow. He didn't waste time looking back. Leo was on the move again, his legs carrying him through the hallways at full speed. He could hear the distant sounds of other soldiers shouting, calling for reinforcements. They were closing in on him, but he had to reach the transport pod. As he rounded a corner, he saw the pod up ahead. His pulse quickened. It was still there, waiting for him. But so were the soldiers. They had anticipated his move. Leo's mind raced. He couldn't fight his way through all of them, not with the time he had left. His only option was to make a stand to hold them off long enough to get away. He reached the transport pod just as more soldiers appeared from the hallway. They raised their weapons, aiming at him with deadly precision. Leo's hand hovered over the control panel of the pod. It was now or never. He was out of time. With a deep breath, Leo activated the pod. The hatch opened, and as the soldiers moved toward him, he dove inside, slamming the door shut behind him. The pod shot forward, its engines roaring to life as it sped through the narrow corridors of the ship. For a brief moment, Leo felt a surge of relief. He had made it. The Xerax soldiers wouldn't be able to catch him now. He could only hope that the damage he had done to the Queen's war machines would be enough to slow her down, to give Earth the time it needed to prepare. But as he looked out of the small window, he saw the Queen's massive warship in the distance. The Xerax fleet was still vast, still powerful. He had only disabled a small part of their forces, but it was a start. Earth wasn't defenseless, but it was vulnerable. There was no time to waste. Leo set his course for Earth, his mind already racing with the next steps. He had to warn them, rally their defenses, and prepare for the inevitable retaliation from the Queen. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. As the transport pod shot through space, Leo leaned back in his seat, his thoughts filled with the future. The Xerax were powerful, but humanity had something they didn't: determination. The will to fight, the will to survive. Leo had seen it in the faces of the young Xerax he had saved, in the eyes of those who had resisted the Queen's rule. They had all been forced into a war they didn't choose, a war that had torn their world apart. But Leo had also seen something else, the hope that was still alive even in the darkest moments. The Queen had underestimated humanity. She thought that because they were not the strongest, they could be easily defeated. But Leo knew the truth. Humanity had been tested time and time again, and each time it had fought back stronger. The Xerax might have their technology, their war machines, and their Queen's cunning, but humanity had something they could never take away, its spirit. Leo's eyes narrowed as he looked ahead. Earth was still out there, and the battle to protect it was far from over. But he wasn't afraid. He had faced the darkness, and he had come out alive. Now it was time to fight back.